Hi, hope everyone can hear me. Tim Ard here. Welcome to Thursday Night Saws, live from Wetumpka, Alabama. We are training this week in Wetumpka with the Central EMC, and finished up today. They've got some weather all around us right now, and so we had a smaller group to finish up. They had some sickness and some different things, so we ended up we're able to finish everything today, but we're still here in the area, and we'll be heading back towards Rome, Georgia in the morning. I hope all are doing well. Hopefully we'll have a good signal tonight, unless this storm screws it up. But got the space link up tonight, so hopefully it's gonna be able to do some good up and down loads here. But anyhow, we've had a great week here. It's been pretty good weather, but it has been super hot. I don't know about where y'all are, but it's was bumping, I guess, somewhere around 90 to 95 degrees, with heat indexes well up in the 100 to 305. So it was a little bit, I guess you'd say, sweaty out there. We're in a pasture area, kind of taking down some trees. They're going to be using it for a kind of a loading site, so it's those trees are coming down, and it's no shade once we took down several pine trees, so it's a hot day out there in Alabama. Next week we'll be over in Gwinnett, Georgia, Gwinnett County up near Lawrenceville. We're going to be working with the Georgia DOT, a train the trainer program for their supervisors. Looking forward to that. We'll get up there, I think, Monday evening, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week we'll be working with them. And so we're got a lot going on. I think the following week we're back around Georgia with some LTAP stuff. So looking forward to the next 2 or 3 weeks. So everything should go pretty good, I hope. Hopefully we have people starting to check in here. Had some questions this week came in on email, and let me see if I can pull that up here. And it had to do with fuel questions. And so I want to kind of address that, see what some of y'all's thoughts were on it. I know I've seen some different videos here over the past few weeks, people testing some different oils and that kind of stuff. Hey, Patrick Pollard, how are you? Hope you're doing well. But the fuel question came in from Jake, and basically it says, good morning. I don't know if you're looking for any more ideas for Thursday night saws or not. If you are, I was thinking a talk about mixed fuel might be interesting. Pump gas versus premixed for not just occasional users, but full-time professionals also. Cost versus benefits. Also, is there an advantage when mixing your own gas to mix 40 to 1 versus the recommended 50 to 1? Seems to be a lot of talk of that these days, and hope this helps. I am really enjoying the videos, especially the live on Thursday. So appreciate that, Jake, and hopefully you're going to be checking in tonight. Hey, Matt Sexton, how are you doing? But I hear the thunder rolling out there, so the lightning's around, but hopefully we've got things gonna stay kind of calm here for the next hour. But some good questions there, and there's a lot of different opinions and a lot of different oil manufacturers, and so many different things that can happen. But hey, Logger Jake, how are you? And so Jake, I think it was you that was writing about the fuel, so that's kind of what we're going to be discussing a little bit this evening. And any other questions? Let's see, Patrick, how long have you been an instructor? How did you get into the business? I started off doing service schools at the distributorship that I was working at in Atlanta back in about 1979, I guess, and 1980 for sure. And I then, in about 1983, became the warehouse manager and service manager for Meyer and White outside of Atlanta, who's the STIHL distributor at that time for Georgia. And so I definitely started instructing there. And during that time, about 19 and I guess it was 84, 85, STIHL had a partnership with Soren Eriksson, and Soren was putting together some different demos and training and stuff for them. And in Georgia, I was helping with them as far as some service issues on saws and things. And then basically, I started working very closely with Soren, organizing things. And then I was hired from the distributorship to work for STIHL Incorporated. And so I was the Georgia service manager at Meyer and White, and then basically I became the applications manager for STIHL, traveling all across the United States working with the distributors. And also part of my thing was keeping up with Soren and his training venues. So I started working with that. Later on, after left STIHL, Soren and I formed a company, and so we started, he had Soren Eriksson training, I had Forest Applications training, and we formed Game of Logging Incorporated together. And so that was it. And then later on, started to work with Husqvarna. We left STIHL sponsorship and more or less started to work under sponsorship for Husqvarna. And then later on, Husqvarna licensed out my forest applications, and we started, Laura and I started training some instructors them, and so that went up until about 2008. I came down with cancer, and so it kind of slowed us down. So since 2008, we're back at forest applications and traveling around the country. So that's what we do. But and I got into the business basically, Patrick, because it didn't have a whole lot left to do. I was working on in high school. I was working on or helping with school buses for the summer, and a lawnmower shop had contacted my instructor there, needed someone to do 2-cycle repairs, and I had been doing that in school a good bit, and so I took that job, and then I ended up. I was asked to go to work at a shop in Hiram, Georgia, and then after that, when he passed away, one of the distributors picked me up, and so that's how I got really started traveling around with it. So maybe that answers your question, but this is 39 years, something like that I've been involved in teaching as far as small engines. Started off on the technical side, and then later, all my time now is pretty much spent on chainsaw safety and maintenance and those kinds of things. Work with cities, county, state, tree care, logging, disaster cleanup groups, about anybody who operates chainsaws. So, hey Nick Pixel, how are you? Do you come up to the Paul Bunyan show in Ohio? We were at the Paul Bunyan show for, I guess, probably 10 years at least, I know. We had our Game of Logging finals there for several years. And also we had Arbor Games, Arbor Master training there. But I haven't been to the Paul Bunyan show since it changed from Hawking College. After they moved over the other one, and Hawking was involved in it, I started more or less staying busy on the training, so I haven't been back to the Paul Bunyan show in quite a number of years. I hear it's still doing pretty good. But we had several things there. We had our Game of Logging finals there for several years. We had Timber Sports, a major event there with STIHL back years ago. And so we've done a lot at the Paul Bunyan show over the years. Actually, we were putting together a training center there, which was the Soren Erickson Training Center. I don't think it's called that anymore, but the instructor there is still doing quite a lot of chainsaw training there. So, David Vossler, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Hope you're doing well. And John M., hello. Hello to you. So we got quite a number bopping in and out here. Going back, I wanted to discuss a couple things on the fuels. And yeah, Patrick, 39 years. I've never done anything else really, so I'm not in my 20s anymore. You're right. I just turned 65, so I'm still out there every day, though. Those hot days kind of get with me a little bit, but I'm still out there kicking around a little bit. So hopefully I can keep going maybe another 10 years if I can. But anyhow, a couple things I wanted to kind of throw out there to get some people thinking about. And back in the STIHL days, I traveled around the United States. We had a thing we were putting together for the service department, technical services, on two-cycle troubleshooting, and also more or less for a warranty manual, that we were looking at all types of failures, engine failures. Some of them were, situations with the power units. Some of them were situations with adjustments. But we found that quite a lot of it was with fuel. At that point in time, there wasn't really much ethanol going on except for two-cycle racing. It was stuff that was put in there called MTBE. That was the oxygenator at that time. And I did a lot of travel around the country because it raised havoc. You go from say colder temperatures in New England. As soon as it started to warm up there, they would try to send it south, and it would cover all the way over to Texas, and even got into the western states quite a lot. MTBE, which is methyl tertial butyl ether or something like that, if I remember correctly, that was an additive that they would add, and they could add a certain percentage of it to the storage facilities. And what it did is it raised the octane and the volatility of the fuel. But what we found is it also raised the vapor pressures of the fuels quite a lot. And so it was quite a task. I did a lot of what they called read vapor testing to check those vapors of the fuel as it created. And at that time, you could look in your can, and a lot of times it'd be boiling. And you still see that in some areas of the country nowadays. Because of the volatility or higher ends, I guess you'd call it, the vapors off of the fuel, it creates a lot of pressure. At that time, it was, I think, to be a maximum of 15 psi, which is somewhere around atmospheric. That was supposed to be regulated to where it never went over that. And a lot of the fuels that we tested, it was higher than 25 psi. You could pour it in the can and you could see it sitting there just building pressure. You had to actually open the cans quite often to allow it to reduce some vapor before you could actually run it through the saws and trimmers and things, because it would create pressures in the tank. Well, you can imagine, if you're familiar with the carburetors, the inlet needle pressure is about 4 psi. So you've got fuel that's 15 to 25 psi. You've got a situation, atmospheric pressure is holding on one side of the diaphragm, and then the spring tension is about 4 psi. And so at 25, it blows the inlet needle right off its seat, and all the fuel runs in and through the carburetor. And so in some cases, it caused quite a lot of havoc around the country. And so we did a lot with different fuel testing, octane boosters to be able to reduce some of that. And several products were damaged out there in the field, professional as well as homeowner, because of fuel related issues. And that's pretty much still the case today, in my opinion. When you go from one area to the other, like I was watching quite a lot of the videos and looking on the internet at some of the writings and latest things that were out over the past couple of years on mix oils and fuels. And when you look at those situations, one oil in, let's say, upstate New York, and the fuel that's up there, whether it's winter or summer, will affect a two-cycle engine differently than, let's say, Atlanta, Georgia, winter to summer. And reason being there's different additives in the fuels, and some of them are detergents that are rolled in with different brands of fuel. If you look, I don't know what it is today, but it used to be, the best we could figure, about 2% of the fuel that was mixed, automotive fuel that went into two cycles and that kinds of stuff, was less than 2%, and that might have even included quite a lot of lawn equipment, but it's less than 2% of the fuels that's consumed. So they weren't really worried about what it did to a small engine at that point, and still today, because of the ethanol percentages, they don't think a whole lot of it either. The main concern is emissions off of the automobiles. And then they want those engines to stay clean, so there's different additives and things that meet the major engine and car manufacturers to be able to deal with that. And some of those things, they don't work very well with mixing oil and gas together. Kind of like you've probably read and heard about, ethanol fuel causes phase separation. Well, it's not really the ethanol, though, as much. It is a solvent somewhat, but it's not as much the ethanol as the moisture content that the ethanol attracts. And so that causes the fuel to separate the oil from your gas. Well, some of the additives that are in the fuels as it travels across the country, because of different blends, different altitudes, different cold and hot climates, different higher humidity climates, all of that stuff is blended to meet the automotive market. And I'm getting to this, that I see this person or this shop says, this is the oil I use, this is the best I've found, and you go from this brand to that brand. Well, those things change with a couple things. First of all, the area of the country, and then the other thing is the actual product that oil is kind of blended to meet its needs. And two-cycle engines by the manufacturers, different manufacturers, have quite a lot of differences in RPMs and heat and different materials that are used, and so it causes a lot of I guess you'd say variables. So it's something that I want to kind of go back in history just a little bit, and I want you to kind of think through this. I've got some things here just kind of scratched out. Let's see what this does, if it'll come over there. I want you to think about when I started in my shop after I left one of the first distributors. I had a dealer that wanted to start a new location, and I ended up trying to buy it out, and more or less I didn't know what I was doing. I had a lot of customers in base as far as small engines, because I had built kind of a reputation, and so it was something that I found it to be important to know the business side of it too. But if you go back to the early 80s anyway, when I first started out, a lot of the fuel mixes that were out there, the first one that I had in the shop was 8-to-1, and I believe that was a Poulan oil or a McCulloch oil, and might have been even Homelight at that time. And then I remember, Homelight came out with a 16-to-1. And I remember everybody at that time, customers and different representatives from distributorships and stuff, they were saying, they're changing all this, they're going to this oil, and it's not going to hold up. And then all of a sudden, here came some of the products, the Echoes and those kinds of things that came in with the trimmers and all, and they had oil that they were canning. At that time, it was all in cans. You had to pop the tops on it, and that was 20 to 1. And you saw that also in some of the STIHL oil that came to the States at that time, and very much so for the concrete saws, the cut quicks and those kind of things. The 20 to 1 lasted for quite a while. And then you start to think about the next one that I saw, and this was probably some of the Home Light and also some of the first Husqvarna oil and stuff. And these are all petroleum-based oils at this time, 32 to 1. And then you saw it come in at 40 to 1. And then all of a sudden it was 50 to 1. Well, then there was a lot of issues that came about, and people were saying, it's just going to mess up engines, it's just going to blow up. And in a lot of cases, it got a little bit tricky, because in certain areas of the country, because of fuel, how it was stored, how it was aerated, oxygenated, all that kind of stuff, it started to get a little bit scary of how well it did lubricate in certain areas. And so as you look at this, I mean, and a lot of customers or operators of saws, they don't understand that, that was 8 parts of what? It was 8 parts of fuel to 1 part of oil. And so now it's 50 parts of fuel to 1 part of oil. And so that mixture has gotten quite a bit thinner. Well, about the same time that you saw the 50 to 1, there was a lot of optimal products that was coming out of Europe, and more or less those optimal products were mixing at 80 to 100 to 1, and everybody's saying, oh no, it's going to be an issue. And in a lot of cases, that optimal worked better at 80 to 100 to 1 than you would have, with a 32 to 40 to 1 ratio. As far as if you tear down the engine, you'd see less carbon. You would end up still with lubrication that would work. I mean, if you looked at STIHL all in Europe and a lot of other countries where you had, I guess you'd call it more stabilized fuel, in other words, more stabilized gasoline, more pure gasoline without all of the additives and cleaning agents and stuff like that, that stuff worked great, and it still works great today. And then you have the AMSOIL types of synthetics and those kinds of things. They mix with the fuels much better in some cases, and you have all these different base. And I've found, just talking to people and traveling around, is that if it went back to some of my first customers that I had in the pro loggers around the country, going around to their sites, talking to them about different things, many of them back and I'm talking the late 80s, if they could find a 6-ounce Coca-Cola bottle, fill it up with 30 weight Quaker State, mix it up good, they ran it in the saws like crazy. And they never had any problems. They loved it, They started going to canned oils, at 20 to 1 and 32 to 1. They felt like they weren't getting lubrication as well. And in some cases, they might have not been. And I remember some of the first chainsaw kits, tool kits used to come with the saws. And one of the things that you had in the saws back then, it came and you'd open it up and say, what in the world is this popsicle stick for? And there was a popsicle stick. Later they were made out of molded plastic, but it was a stick that was in there to actually clean the carbon. You'd pull the exhaust off and clean the carbon out of the ports from the outside with a popsicle stick, so you didn't have the buildup to clog up the exhaust port. And so, but those engines ran like crazy. If you go back, a lot of them are still out there running today, and the McCullochs and the 33 Poulans. I still see some of those. There's not much production going on, but there's still people out there cutting firewood with them. And you start looking at that, and a lot of that, they were running just regular 30 weight motor oil mixed to 1s. if you look for the